Welcome back to the Saturday Scholars College Football Podcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I am Shoob. That is Xan. And we are here to do ACC win totals part 3. Finally, it's about time we're going to get this conference done and move on to the next one, which will be the Big Ten. But man, a lot has happened in the world the last few days, man, since we last recorded. But I know we got to bang this one out today. I'm feeling a little under the weather, but I'll be able to power through. I got a sore throat and whatnot, so hopefully I sound good tonight. But yeah, how's it going, man?
It's going pretty good. College football 24 is coming out here in a few days, so
25.
can't complain. 25, yeah. But coming out, long awaited. It's coming out here in a few days, so
Yeah, we made a video about that one, and honestly, I'm pleasantly surprised. I was pretty skeptical, but so far from what I've seen, for the most part, the game looks like it's going to be a banger. Which, not gonna lie, I had my doubts about EA. Had my doubts. I think we all did.
hey,
But
we still can't. I mean, the game's not out yet,
that's
so
fair. That's fair. But so far, all I'm saying, so far, it's looking better than I expected. But I guess
yeah.
the verdict's still out until we actually get the game in front of us.
Except
All
for
right.
Colorado being 99 overall, basically.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you knew that was going to have to happen. All right. Well, let's get into it, man. The ACC Part 3. So today, this is sort of like the quote-unquote miscellaneous patch of teams that we got here. We did the former Atlantic Division teams, the former Coastal Division teams, and now we have all of the recent newbies to the ACC, plus Notre Dame, because Notre Dame is an independent, but they play sort of a pseudo ACC schedule. They're an ACC member in every sport except football. But today we got Cal, Pitt, SMU, Stanford, and Syracuse, all of the latest additions to the ACC in the past 12 years or so. So, you ready to get into it? First on deck is the Cal Bears. Cal comes in with a win total of 6 wins, even on the money. Juice is -110 to the over, -120 to the under. So, Sportsbook's giving you a 6 even there. At least Caesars is giving you 6 even. So, what's your take on the Cal Bears, man? It's man, Justin Wilcox, he's been there for a good amount of time now. This is his 8th season now at Cal. Can you believe that? 8th season.
Good little bit, yeah. I thought Justin Wilcox was on the up and end and on the way out last year, but they overperformed and they did a great job. So shout out where credit is due for Justin Wilcox. Great coaching job. And then we have the new promotion of Mike Bloch to OC, and then we also have Peter Sermon coming back. So I mean, we have a pretty relatively stable group in their in this coaching staff. Everyone's been there before, so no new faces. They returned the 53rd offense, 76th defense. Not really that great, but Cal actually surprised me. They made some splashes in the portal that I wasn't really fully aware of that I think have some potential to be really good for them and to maybe put them on the radar and to maybe being one of these upset potential teams. So Cal's not a team that you can just easily overlook on the schedule. Let's jump into it. Fernando Mendoza or Chandler Rogers? Who do you go with here? Fernando Mendoza, he was a freshman last year. He played all right, didn't have the best ratios, but then you have Chandler Rogers coming in from, North Texas, who basically threw for 3,400 yards, had 29 touchdowns and 5 picks. So, I mean, if it's me, I'm thinking we're going to see Chandler Rogers out there. You don't come in for your senior year to sit on the bench. Especially when you put up numbers like that at North Texas. I think Chandler Rogers will probably be the starter, but we'll see. As of right now, Mendoza is the projected starter, but I feel like it's going to go to Chandler Rogers. And then, of course, you got Jaden Ott coming back. That's a huge get. That's a NFL running back right there, averaging 5.3 yards a carry, had 1,300 yards, 12 touchdowns. Love it at that position. Returning Tron Grizzle, 600 yards, 5 touchdowns. And then the rest of it is just all portal ads, man. Utah, they bring in a Utah transfer, Mikey Matthews, a Notre Dame transfer, Tobias Merriweather, who was basically a 95 grade guy out of high school. So, I mean, he's at least got some potential there, and he's still young. So, Notre Dame had a lot of people leave. And then you have a New Mexico State transfer in Jonathan Bradley, who brings 600 yards to the table. And then Keon Graves, who also was a 96th grade guy coming out of high school, and he's coming from Ohio State. So you've got a pretty intriguing group of receivers coming in here. Some of them, yes, unproven, but at the same time, the athletic pedigree is clearly there based upon their high school grade. So who knows, with the proper development, this could actually be a pretty dang good unit, especially when you have some support from the run game with Jaden Ott. So California might actually have a pretty solid offense this year. Now we'll see who they trot out there to play quarterback. But I think if they put Chandler Rogers out there, I actually like this team to do pretty well this year on offense. So they were sitting there at the 53rd offense last year. I think this offense has the potential to teeter in the top 35 if those wide receivers, pan out. So we'll see, man. We look at the offensive line. I'm not really too blown away by the O-line, Shoob. They lost their best guy in Rush Reimer. That's about it. Everyone else doesn't grade out very well on that O-line. They come back. I mean, it's a very, very poor unit. And there may be some continuity, but for the most part, you might get slightly better, but not much better. So this is kind of going to be the Achilles heel of this offense, is this offensive line. So definitely going to be a struggle in that department, but we'll see. I do like the potential for this offense, and the offensive line just has to play a little bit better moving forward. And let's jump over to the other side on scrimmage, defensive line. They've got some guys coming back. They've got Nicky Correa coming back at nose tackle. They've got an edge rusher and Xavier Carlton coming back, who's pretty solid. They did lose their best guy in David Reese. So, Shoob, I do think they're going to have still a relatively decent defensive line. It's not going to be, elite by any stretch of the imagination, but they're going to have serviceable players there that can be decent on the line of scrimmage. I'm going to go with an average D-line. But depth is definitely a concern when it comes to that position for me personally, when it comes to Cal. So we'll see. They also lost their best linebacker in Jackson Sermon. But I don't know, man, this linebacking unit, I don't think is going to be very good at all. So we'll see. They took quite a step back in that department. And then we go back to the secondary. They lost Patrick McMorris to the NFL. You do bring back a lot of other guys, though, which is really encouraging. I think their secondary is actually going to be pretty solid because you bring back Craig Woodson, you bring back Lumagia Hearns, you bring in Marcus Harris from Idaho, who has a very solid PFF grade for coverage and doing all these other things in the secondary. So there's at least that. So decent D-line. Maybe the middle is a little bit suspect, and then the DBs are pretty solid. And then there's the potential for the offense to be good too. So I think this team has the potential to really surprise some people, Shoob. A lot of people aren't going to expect much from Cal, but I think they're better than most people are going to give them credit for. Let's jump into the schedule. The schedule, UC Davis, win. Then you go at Auburn. We remember what happened last year. I know this game was in Cal, but they almost beat Auburn last year.
Yeah,
so
if Auburn's caught
napping right here, this could very well be a loss for the Auburn Tigers. I'm still going to lean towards a loss here for Cal. It is an away game, SEC territory. You didn't get it done in your own home stadium. I don't think you're going to get it done in Alabama. So we'll see. Then you play San Diego State at home. I think that's a winnable game. I think they win that game. Then you go at FSU, probably a loss. Then you get a bye week to prep for Miami. Now, we know, and we talked about this when we covered our Miami section, Shoob, that Cristobal going to Cristobal at some point. This could be a game where Cristobal's, and this could be a win for Cal. This very well could be.
I wrote that down specifically about this
legitimately,
game. This is a trap game.
It's coming off a bye week. Miami's got to go all the way across the country to play Cal in California. And if Miami's already taken a loss by this point in the season, they might be on sleep alert for this game. So, I mean, we'll see, man. I do think Cal is going to lose this game. But, man, do not be shocked if Cal pulls this one out. I mean, just the geography of this, everything. I mean, and then now Cal's got to go across the country and go at Pitt. That's tough, Shoob. That's tough. I mean, this is where these win totals are going to be really interesting because I don't know just how obviously travel is going to impact these players, but how impactful is it going to be on the field? Is it going to be more, or is it going to be more like, psychiatric when they're not on the field? Or is that going to actually affect their ability on the field? I'm very curious to see that because we're got Cal going all the way to Pitt, man. 1,000-mile flight just for a football game, man. I think they'll beat Pitt, but we'll see, man. That is definitely still a probable. I can't definitively give it to them. Then they've got NC State. I think they lose that game. Oregon State, definitely a punch below what it used to be. They don't have their head coach anymore. I think they can win that game. And they're at home as well. Then you go for a bye week. And then you go at Wake. That's a win. Syracuse at home. I think they can win that. Stanford at home, I think, is winnable. And then at SMU, I think they're going to get clobbered in that game. So look at the schedule. UC Davis, San Diego State. We've got maybe Pitt, Wake, Cuse, Stanford. So I'm thinking, and then if they pull out Miami, that's a 7. But I'm looking at like 6 games there that I'm seeing is like, okay, I could see them winning those games. But at the same time, I don't think they're going to win all 6, Shoob. And even if they pull that win against Miami and then say they lose one of these 6, that's still 6 wins. So we're looking at a push minimally. I think 6 is a very good. I think Cal will go bowling 6-6, but I think it's more likely, despite all the improvement that they have, I think it's more likely that they go 5-7 than they go 7-5. I'm going to go under with a confidence point of 1 though, because
Mm.
I do see some potential, like I said, with the offensive unit, and they still have some decent players in their secondary to form a formidable defense.
Interesting. I thought you were going the other way there for a minute. Well, I have very much similar opinions, similar assessment on this team. The main takeaways that I got from this team is, or the main questions, I guess I should say, especially on offense, is you got the new OC that you highlighted, Mike Bloch, promoted from offensive line coach, inexperienced offensive coordinator, and then the offensive line. Those are definitely the biggest concerns of the offense. Can we expect progression from Fernando Mendoza? That was the biggest question for me because he's still young. He's still a redshirt sophomore. I actually think Mendoza is still going to be the guy. And I had to look into this QB battle because when I first looked at it on paper, I was like, oh, Chandler Rogers put up great numbers at North Texas. Okay, yeah, that's got to be the guy. But I looked into it and I saw when Chandler Rogers went up against Power 4 competition, his numbers took a huge nosedive. And that's going to be a little bit of a theme here on this episode here for today when we talk about a couple other quarterbacks. But anyways, I looked at Chandler Rogers and I was like, I don't know if he's going to be the guy. I still think Mendoza has the edge, at least for now. And Mendoza's younger too, so Mendoza has potential to be the
Mhm.
starter for the next 2 to 3 maybe
And they do
seasons.
have insurance. They've got 2 quarterbacks.
Right, and we all know that's one thing that I like. That's a Shoob thing right there.
Shoob's
Is
going
I
over.
I love I love my quarterback insurance, man. I love
Quarterback insurance
quarterback
over,
insurance.
over.
And then on the defense, so I'm actually pretty high on this defense, man. Uh, they were pretty solid last year. I mean, they were 48th overall in the country defensively, which is pretty quiet. I know the defensive line's not a strength, but that's why they have that 2-4-5 shell, which is very interesting. It's more like a 3-3-5, but it's they don't have defensive line's not the strength of this defense, but they play to that appropriately. And I look at the back end. I actually think the back end is definitely going to be the strength of this team. I think this defense could take a jump into the top 30, top 35. I'm fairly high on it. And again, I think quietly this defense is going to be maybe the better unit of either side of the ball. And then when we look at the schedule, my model has them projected for 6.6 wins, which is a lean to the over. Got them favored against UC Davis, San Diego State, Pitt, Wake, Syracuse, and Stanford. I have one toss up against Oregon State, or the model has a toss up against Oregon State, but I actually disagree with that. I think the model is a little too high on Oregon State. It has Oregon State still rated pretty high. I have to believe that to see it, or I have to believe it to see it, if I should say, with Oregon State, with all the guys that they lost. But I would personally have them as a slight favorite over Oregon State in a non-conference game, which is crazy to think that that's a non-conference game now, and then they're going to go travel all the way across the country to play Pitt in a conference game. It's just, man, bizarro world here. But I like that they added depth in the portal, and I think that this could just be a sneaky decent team, man. The only thing is, here are my drawbacks. The first drawback is obviously you're unfamiliar with the new league. I mean, completely unfamiliar with the new league. You're going into the ACC. I usually, more often than not, I feel like teams that go into a new conference generally struggle. Now, that's not always the case, but anecdotally, at least off the top of my head, I can't recall the last time a team went into a new Power Four conference and just lit it up automatically. And then secondly, yeah, man, I think the model is overlooking the cross country travels. You highlighted it perfectly. I think the model is overlooking that a little bit, so it makes me hesitant about going over here, but I'm still going to go over. because I like that push insurance, man. I like the push insurance of 6. I think there's a high floor here with this team, particularly because I'm high on the defense and I like the quarterback insurance. I see 7-5 with a high floor more likely than 5-7 with a lower ceiling. That's the bottom line here. So I'm going to say over with low confidence, but I like that 6 even is the number here. That's nice push insurance for Cal.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, Cal's going to be an interesting team to watch this year because they could end up being a pretty dang solid team. So we'll see.
Yeah,
It just depends.
you got to give a minor shout out to Justin Wilcox. I mean, being on the hot seat for like 3 years in a row, it definitely can't be fun, but he's quietly, I think, done an okay job, decent job there, and he's did a good job in the portal, which I was surprised at. They've done a great job in the portal very quietly. So, all right, next up is the Pitt Panthers. Pitt. Woof. Man, Pitt has had a crazy saga the last few years with Pat Narduzzi. Narduzzi's now entering his 10th season at Pitt. Can you believe that? This is going to be his 10th season there. So by the end of this season, he will be at Pitt for a decade. They went 3-9 last year, by far the worst record that Narduzzi's had at Pitt. He went 11-3 in 2021. Remember when they had Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison, went 11-1, won the ACC out of nowhere that year. And then they went 9-4 in 2022. And then there was a huge fall in 2023 to 3-9. Narduzzi's gone on record saying that he thinks this team is in store for a big bounce back in 2024. Well, the win total says 5.5, which is better than 3-9. Well, what do you think, man? Do you think Pitt's going bowling? Do you think they are in store for a bounce back in 24?
Pitt needs a bounce back badly. If they go 3-9 again, Narduzzi might be on the hot seat, man. I don't care if he's been there for 10 years. We're looking at a new era of football. You're playing in a whole new super conference. So you need to stay relevant. So we'll see, man. We'll see. But let's dive into it. It's no secret their offense was their weakness last year. Pitt's offense was atrocious, man. And as usual, their defense was still pretty solid, being a top 40 defense. And that's the only reason Pitt was able to win any games whatsoever. Their offense was outside the top 100 in terms of efficiency, which is just terrible. Absolutely terrible. So, Shoob, we look at this team, and this team is a little bit harder to digest because there are some unknowns. Quarterback, we have Nate Yarnell, who played pretty well in a limited time. He had 600 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. Good ratios, good small sample size. Show that maybe he can be the guy there. But then they also brought in Eli Holston from Alabama, who was a 94 grade guy out of high school. And that's a very high 4-star guy. So they've got 2 quarterbacks. Again, another team with 2 quarterbacks. But the question here is, I think it's going to be Yarnell, but how good is Nate Yarnell? Probably better than Phil Yurkovich. I'm thinking it's at least a step up at that spot, especially in the limited sample size that we saw there. So I think it is a slight edge in the quarterback department for Pitt, especially when you've got a backup in Holstein, who probably is at least a solid backup. You know, I mean, I would assume so based on his pedigree. Now, returning, Rodney Hammond, running back, returns 500 yards, 4 touchdowns, and then good old Cade Bell from West Carolina, our new offensive coordinator, brings over one of his guys, a running back from West Carolina, who spouts 900 yards and 13 touchdowns. So we've got production at running back. And you know Pitt, they always have these running backs. They love to run the football. That is a big part of their offensive scheme. So it's not going to matter as much when we say we lost Bub Means to the NFL at wide receiver, because we're more of a run-dominant offense here. Now, they do have Kunada Mumpfield returning, who's a pretty solid receiver. He only had 500 yards or so last year. But then the rest of their group is a little bit iffy. Someone's going to have to step up. No one is proven. Everyone here is fresh and on the line and ready to make a name for themselves. So we'll see if anyone does it. But as of right now, it doesn't look too promising. Now, we look at the offensive line, Shoob, and this is kind of a big thing. They lost their tackle, Matt Gonsalves, to the NFL. Probably butchered how you pronounce that, but we know the spirit of it. And then, but they have a lot of O linemen returning aside from that. But just like Cal, Shoob, the O linemen that return grade horribly on PFF. for their offensive line grades. Run blocking, pass blocking, they don't grade well in anything. And so, yes, you've got some continuity and some experience in your snaps coming back, but how beneficial is that going to be? You just lost your best tackle. Normally, we say, like, okay, well, if they're keeping the same unit, then they might at least be a little bit better by default just from experience. But what happens when you lose your best player on that line? I don't know. If I don't know. This line is probably going to be at least what it was last year, if not take a step back. What are your thoughts on that, Shoe? What do you think about the Pitt O line?
I have in my notes that it's not good, but if it improves, it will definitely help this offense by default from being a sub 100 ranked offense. So
Legitimately. And Cade Bell from Western Carolina, I know scooped over that, but I mean, that man had a lot of success over there at West Carolina. Many 500-yard offensive games. So it's going to be interesting to see if that will translate to Pitt. I'm thinking that Pitt might go more air raid with this new OC, so we'll see.
it has to be a
But
good thing. It has to
yeah,
be.
but to what weapons? But I'm interested, man. I'm intrigued by Pitt's offense this year. I think they can definitely take a step forward, but there aren't too many weapons on there that really just make me go like, "Oh yes, look at this team right here." Now, look at the defense. D line looks pretty underwhelming because they lost a lot of guys on the D line. They lost a lot of guys, a lot of rotational pieces, a lot of depth, and they didn't bring in a lot of replacements on the D line either. So I'm worried about depth when it comes to the defensive line. It can still be a solid unit. It's usually been a strength of Pitt's teams in the past, but this time I just don't know, man. They do bring back in the next level, they bring back Brandon George, their best linebacker. So that's pretty awesome. That's really good for their run defense, which is something they absolutely pride themselves in, the Pitt Panthers. And then we look at the secondary, both safeties return. That's really nice. I like that a lot. And both of them grade out pretty well. But the corner spot looks a little bit iffy to me. They're going to have someone step up on the outside. We'll see. I think the defense could still be solid, but I'm expecting it to be a regression from what it was last year. They were ranked 39th last year. I'm expecting them to be in the top 50 still, but not quite what they were last year. What they need is this offense to go from 113th into the top 60, man. And that sounds like a huge leap, but when you're 113th, it's really not that big of a leap to get into 60. You just got to play average. So let's jump into the schedule, man. Kent State, probably win. At Cincy, it's tricky, man. Cincy's not that good. They might be able to win that game. That's going to be a toss-up for me. Youngstown State, I'm going to say a win. Bye week at UNC, I'm going to say a probable. I feel like they can do something with that. Cal, probable. Bye. Syracuse, probable. At SMU, probably a loss. Virginia, probable, lean win. Clemson, lost. Louisville, lost. Boston College, probable, lean win. So when we look at Pitt, the line is sitting here at 5.5. And let's just say they get Kent State, they get Youngstown, and say best case scenario they get Cincy also. They start 3-0. There are other winnable games, or they're most likely to win games are Cal, Syracuse, and Virginia, Boston College. They got four there. They got four. But this is assuming they go 3-0. They've got to win three of those four to get this over. I don't like to do it to them, but I'm going to go under to stop beating around the bush. I'm going to go under with a confidence point of 1 for Pitt. I'm considering going to 2, but I'm going to stick at 1 for now just because I don't think Pitt's going to take that next step. I'd be at 1.5 if I could on telltale there, but I'm just going to go with confidence point 1.
I think you should go for 2 just because of what their fans said to us on Twitter last year.
Hey, proved them
And
wrong though.
we were pretty right about that. In fact, they were worse than we thought. But anyways, I will say this. I think Pitt fans that are watching this probably going to be screaming in the comments at you about Kanata Mumfield as a weapon at receiver because he is pretty good. He just didn't have a good quarterback throwing to him. So I'm calling it right now. If somebody mentions Kanata Mumfield in the comments, because we know though they wouldn't have made it this far into this section of the video and they wouldn't be watching this, someone's going to comment that. But anyways, yeah, man, I share pretty much the same opinions here, and I am also very intrigued about the new scheme change on offense. In fact, about like half of my notes here are just simply about Cade Bell and how this offense is going to look. Good on Narduzzi, first of all, for going with a scheme change and getting a new OC. I think it's going to be good, but it's probably going to require patience. I think that just the scheme change and going more up tempo and having the quarterbacks throw early and making early decisions just by default is going to be a good thing. And the offensive line, yes, was bad last year, but most of those guys return. It's got to be improved by default, even if it's not good, even if it's still not that great. It's got to improve by default. Scheme change, throwing the ball more, going more up tempo. This offense can't be sub 100 in schedule adjusted efficiency this year. It just has to be better by default. The question is, how much better will it be? So it's going to be interesting, man. Cade Bell said he quote unquote had them drinking through a fire hose in spring in terms of the quarterbacks and the offensive players learning the new system. So we'll see if it's ready to go by fall. But anyhow, yeah, man. Other than that on offense, my last one note that I had was running back Daniel Carter. I know on our lads he's listed as the fourth string running back, but I'm like, give that guy the ball more. The guy was one of the most efficient players on offense last year, and he didn't get hardly any touches. I think there's certain things here like throwing the ball more, running more up tempo offense, giving the ball to Daniel Carter, who's a veteran guy that's been proven to be an efficient running back. Should be easy wins. Like those should be easy slam dunk changes that you make to your scheme and personnel decision making that should make the offense better. But we'll see, we'll see. But I'm expecting improvement from the offense by default. And then on the defense, yeah, man, defensive line got gutted. There's just so much lack of experience in the front seven. I think that there's going to be significant regression expected on defense. That's what I wrote down. Like, I think this defense is going to regress pretty hard. I think it's just, unfortunately, you see it coming, but we'll see. I know Narduzzi, his calling card is defense. So potentially guys that have been in his system for a little bit could help wither that blow, but I think that the defense is going to fall off a good bit here. As far as the schedule, man, the model is 5.2 wins, so close to that 5.5 number, a little bit lean to the under. Kent State, Youngstown State, and at Boston College, I have as favorites. And then my toss-ups are at Cincinnati, home versus Syracuse, and home versus Virginia. I see too many toss-ups and not enough wins in the bank for them to confidently, I would say, go to a bowl game. So for the same reason that you said, I'm gonna have to lean under here at 5.5, and it is a lean. I think Narduzzi is the kind of coach where you're kind of looking at him kind of like a Gundy, kind of like a Whittingham, kind of like one of those guys where you don't expect the bottom to fall off, and I just don't see a pick can be really bad 2 seasons in a row. But at the same time, on the surface, I'm looking at this and I'm like, I don't see that much room for improvement from 3-9. I'll say that. Like I don't see them jumping back to going 7-5, 8-4, 9-3 like they were a couple years ago. I just don't see that. But that being said, I'm going to go under with one confidence point, and the only reason I'm not going with two is because it's Narduzzi, because he's a good coach, and I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. So under 5.5 wins with low confidence, just like you. So I think bottom line is you and I are pretty much in agreement on the pit under 5.5 with low confidence for the exact same reasons. But it'll be interesting to see, man, how they do. And yeah, if they don't do well again, like you mentioned at the top of this segment, what's going to go on with Narduzzi? Like we all know that he doesn't like the new landscape of college football. He was pretty vocal about when USC pretty much tampered with Jordan Addison a couple of years ago, back when the portal really became the hot thing. Uh, and I kind of respect him for doing that. But yeah, he might be one of those guys like Saban. He just might be like, yeah, I'm done. I don't want to deal with this anymore. He kind of strikes me as one of those guys, but we'll see. If you're a Pitt fan, let us know in the comments what you guys think. And hopefully you've learned your lesson from last year when you come at us. So we'll see. I'm just kidding. All right. Next up, SMU, the Mustangs. Welcome to the ACC. They have dropped the bag. I mean, they dropped the bag big time to be in this conference, and they're not even taking any TV revenue.
For 9 years.
They're going in cold turkey, man. I love it.
That's crazy.
It is crazy, but that just shows you how deep the pockets are, man. This is a program that back in the day, if we all know this, back in the day, if that death penalty never happened, they could be they could be right there with Texas in terms of like powerhouses in college football. You never know, man. You never
Yeah.
know. But anyways, They're in their first season here in the ACC in the Heartland, and they're sitting with a win total of 8.5. So it's a very interesting team, man. And the sportsbooks expect them to be a team that's going to have success right on or in their first season in the ACC. What do you think on the Mustangs?
I agree with that. I think the Mustangs are probably one of the best teams in the ACC in year one. They have a hell of a good team, man. You look at this team, and they have so much returning production. Let's just jump into it. There's so much to like about these guys. Look, quarterback Preston Stone is obviously my favorite here. Very, very good player. 3,200 yards, 28 TDs, 6 picks. I mean, good ratios, good production. Love to see it, man. They return a running back in Jalen Knighton, who brings 700 yards to the table and a 5.5 yards per carry. They bring in LJ Johnson, or they return LJ Johnson. That's another 600 yards. I mean, they got returning running backs. Then they return Jordan Hudson. They return Romulo Brinson, Jake Bailey, and then they bring in some guys for their offensive line, and Justin Osborne, Justin Osborne and Logan Parr return, and they're some of their highly graded offensive line guys because this offensive line was actually very good last year. And then they also have more depth with Ben Sparks, who also graded out pretty well. And then you add the tackle Savion Byrd from OU. This is going to be a pretty solid offensive line, Shoob. They're going to have a quarterback, they're going to have running backs, they're going to have a good line, and they're going to have some returning players at the wide receiver position, a lot of returners. So, I mean, this is just a huge upward arrow for SMU in terms of improving, especially when we look at SMU had the 35th most efficient offense last year. I looked for that to go into the top 25, man. I think this is going to be a pretty solid offense. And then when you look at the defense, it's even, I would argue it's even more impressive. Like, yes, they lose Elijah Chapman, who was a pretty good anchor in that defense, but dude, they still have Elijah Roberts, who's a great pass rusher. They added Omari Abor in the portal from Ohio State, who was like a 96 grade guy coming out of, high school. So he's got athleticism and size. And then Anthony Booker from Arkansas. And then they just got some returning guys there too that were in the rotation. So I think they're going to have a pretty dang solid D line as well, especially relative to this conference. Then you go back to the next level, and I love this because their two best linebackers also return in Ahmad Walker and Kobe Wilson. They're going to have a really good front seven. They're going to be very formidable. And then you look at the back end, and you've got Isaiah Nakobia coming back, Ahmed Moses coming back, Jonathan McGill coming back, and Cale Sanders coming back. Four DBs who all graded out very, very well, and they're all coming back. Shoob, last year, SMU was 31st in defensive efficiency, which, quite frankly, is really impressive. Because when I think of SMU, I think of offense. I don't think of defense, and they were more efficient on the defensive end than they were on the offensive end. This is a very good and well-rounded team, Shoob, and with all that's coming back, we're looking at a team that's top 35 on both offensive and defensive efficiency. I expect that to go up and to potentially top 25 on both ends. If you're top 25 on both sides of the ball, you're going to be a pretty dang good football team, Shoob. I am very high on the Pony Express this year. Very high. Look, they play Nevada to start. That's a win. They play Houston Christian. That's a win. They play BYU. I'm pretty sure they're going to win that game. They're at home. You get a bye week to prepare for TCU. I think they go 2-0 against the Big 12. They're 4-0 coming out the gate. Then you play FSU, and it's a probable, man. I think they can beat FSU. It's a probable. I'm not going to give it to them for the sake of the win total, but I would not be shocked if they go and beat FSU. Then you got at Louisville, a probable. I'll say between FSU and Louisville, they get one of those and lose one of them. Bye week at Stanford, win. At Duke, win. Pitt, win. Bye week. Boston College, Virginia, Cal, they got a very favorable draw in the ACC. I mean, look, you've got Louisville and FSU. Outside of that, you basically got all like the bottom feeding teams in the ACC. They got the most generous draw. I would not be shocked if the Pony Express, because of this draw, finds themselves in the conference championship or right there at the end, fighting for that conversation. And with that being said, I'm going over, Shoob, but I'm going to give it 2 points of confidence. I'm definitely going over. I want to say 3, but I'm definitely going to go with 2 for now, just in case there's an injury, because Preston Stone, we don't have a lot of insurance behind him. So we're going to go with 2 points to the over.
Yeah, Preston Stone nursing that leg injury from last year too. He should be ready to go by the beginning of the season, so he should be fine. But yes, that is definitely one of the concerns. Well, first of all, I just want to highlight this. Rhett Lashley, he's now in his third season and at SMU. He's gone 18-9 his first 2 years, pretty solid. So this is where SMU fans, you got to cover your ears here. He's now in his third season at SMU. He's an Arkansas native, and Lashley also played quarterback at Arkansas back in the day from '02 to '04. So his alma mater is Arkansas. He's from the state of Arkansas. Who's on the hot seat this year and who's probably
Sam
going to be fired at
Pittman.
the end of the year and who's
Yeah.
definitely going to have a head coaching vacancy and who's probably going to be like, now's probably the time I should leave because I'm losing Preston Stone and all of these good players after this year. So I just want to point
Yep.
that out there. If all I'm saying is if Rhett Lashley takes the head coaching job at Arkansas next year, 2025, I would not be surprised. But that's wild speculation. I know it's July, but I'm just saying. All right. Anyways, yeah, man, whew, man, this is gonna be tough. This is gonna be a tough pill to swallow because I have a rebuttal here. I have a rebuttal against your SMU hype. I'm planting some mines along the trail here, and I'm crashing the Pony Express. All right. So I initially looked at this team and I was like, yeah, dang, this is gonna be a pretty good team. But then I looked at Preston Stone and I was like, all right, I know Preston Stone's put up great numbers and everything, but I want to see how he does against or how he did in his career so far against Power Four competition, since now he's going to be in the Power Four. And last year, granted, it was only 2 games, but last year's 2 games against Oklahoma and TCU were his two lowest performing games. And he went 42 to 70, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, only had a 102 passer rating. Listen, I know a lot of this could just be noise because it was only 2 games, but he did beat up on the bottom half of the American. That was pretty bad last year. Same thing with Chandler Rogers. It was one of my concerns when I initially was looking at him for Cal, and I was like, well, I don't know if he's even going to be the guy. So call me skeptical here, but I have to see or I have to see Preston Stone rather. I have to see him consistently do well against the big boys for me to change my opinion here on this team. And that's a big deal because Cal is an air raid offense. They run an air raid offense. So Preston Stone's passing ability against good teams is going to determine basically how well this team is this year, bottom line. And he is more impactful than any quarterback based on the scheme that they run there at SMU than most other quarterbacks at other schools. So that was my first red flag here. Everything else is definitely a green flag. I mean, they literally have all their skill position guys returning. Like, yes, for sure. There's a lot of good things to look forward to. The two new offensive tackles, I looked into them, Savion Byrd and Andrew Chemley from Arkansas. They both did not perform well as pass blockers. Now, again, that's another thing. They're running an air raid. So I look at these new offensive line transfers and I'm like, all right, how were you against the run as a run blocker? How were you as a pass blocker? They weren't quite as good as pass blockers. And you could say, oh, well, they're coming from the Power Four to the G5. Well, that's not the case. They were in the Power Four. They're staying in the Power Four because SMU is now in the ACC. So you don't really have that excuse there of guys going down to another level. So that was one thing. So at tackle, I'm a little bit of a red flag, and then Preston Stone at quarterback against better teams, better competition. Call me a skeptic. Defense on the other hand, I can't really poke many holes with this defense. I do think this defense is going to be legitimately pretty good. I think this defense, and you kind of mentioned it, it's kind of surprising because I had the same biases going into this. I was not expecting to really look into SMU's defense and think these guys were actually pretty solid last year, very quietly. And the defense was more efficient than the offense, according to the metrics. And in my opinion, I think that has the chance to be the case again this year. This defense might be the one that actually carries this team this year, I think. But anyways, the model has SMU projected for 9.4 wins. So the model actually really likes SMU. And I'm gonna go against my model here. I'm gonna say under. I'm gonna say under. I know I feel like I'm crazy now, especially after hearing your assessment, because I knew you would probably be higher on them, but I didn't know how high you were gonna be, and I was like, oh man, I don't know. I don't know how this difference of opinion is gonna be here, but I will say this.
My concern's quarterback health. I think if Stone's
Yeah.
healthy, it's an over, man. Because schedule dynamics, man, they got the bottom barrel of the ACC. I think they can do it.
They did. And in fact, they also play in week 0 against Nevada. And if you look at their schedule, because every team is 2 bye weeks this year, they actually have a third bye week because they play in week 0. And their bye weeks are like perfectly spaced out. So where they play in 4 sets of 3, and then they have a bye week spaced in between. So this schedule is like a dream for health and recovery and everything, and just spacing everything out very nicely. So I will admit that there's a lot of good to look at here. It's I don't know what it is, man. I just call it a gut feeling. I'm going against my model. The model says 9.4 is a strong overplay, but I'm gonna go under. I'm going under. I just don't know what it is. I can't see SMU going into the ACC and just lighting it up and winning 9 to 10 games in the first year. I know the schedule is on the lighter side, but I'm just skeptical, man. SMU fans probably gonna hate me. So, but let us know in the comments, man. But I got a gut feeling here, and if I'm wrong, I'm gonna definitely hate myself because my model is telling this is a strong overplay. So, I like to be wrong here because if SMU lights it up in the ACC in year 1, that'll be fun to watch because it's gonna be the competitive league this year. So we'll see, man. Call me a skeptic. I'm gonna go under, and I'm gonna go under with 2 confidence points. So, oh man.
Mirror, we're going mirror image there, but the
I
opposite
know.
direction.
A difference of 4 confidence points here. I think this is, or we had a we had a
That's a
difference of
swing.
5 earlier. Yeah, but that's a pretty big swing. Um, and I will admit here, I am 95% of the time I go based on just strictly analytical and objective thoughts and opinions. But for some reason, I decided to go with my gut here, and I decided to go with what my gut was telling me. But we'll see. If I'm wrong, then I'm gonna feel like an idiot because I feel like when I did this in the past, it didn't go well for me. So we'll see. All right, SMU fans, let us know in the comments what you guys think about your team's success in the first year in the ACC. All right. Another team who it's their first year in the ACC and they're all the way out on the Pacific Coast, the Stanford Cardinal. Now, Stanford, man, we expected them to be just dreadly awful like last year. Like we expected them to be god awful, one of the worst teams in all the Power Five. And to their credit, they won 3 games. I think we got a push, or we still got the under on the win total. I forget what it was last year, but
I think it was three and
they,
a half.
yeah, it was 3.5, and we were like, oh, that's a slam dunk. But you know what? They gave it a run for their money. They got that big win against Colorado, that crazy game where they came back from down 29 points or whatever. But anyways, so now Stanford's in year 2 under Troy Taylor, and they got a win total again of 3.5. This time it's juiced to the over, minus 155 to the over. So the sports books are telling you there's a little bit of a lean there. And Troy Taylor's got his second season now at Stanford, and he's actually got some playmakers now on his team that have emerged from last year. And the I guess I'll say this, the outlook isn't as bleak as we thought it was going to be going into last year, now that they're in year 2. So what do you think on the Cardinal in year 2 under Troy Taylor?
I like Troy Taylor as a coach. As down as I was on them last year, I'm still not very high on them this year. Now, they did show, based upon last year, that Troy Taylor is a good coach. And that's something that I'm bringing into consideration in this discussion. I look at the metrics, man. The metrics do not jump out in any meaningful way. 77th in offensive efficiency, 118th in defensive efficiency. My God, Shoob. My God, that's so bad. Now, we look over quarterback, Ashton Daniels or Elijah Brown. Probably Ashton Daniels, I would think. Either way, not very good ratios, man. 11 to 8, not very. And then at the running back position, they don't have any productive guys. So everyone is just basically a greenhorn here trying to make their way into this starting position. It doesn't mean they're not going to be effective or anything like that, but it's just such a wild card position. They don't have any meaningful returning reps at that spot. And then we look at the wide receivers. They do have Elick Aomanor coming back, and that's an NFL wide receiver right there. He's an absolute beast. And then they have Tiger Bachmeier coming back, who's a 400-yard guy. Don't know, man. Here's another recurring theme. This offensive line has a lot of returners, but none of them grade out very well. So how good is this offensive line going to be? Maybe a little bit better than last year, but still pretty awful. Um, that has been a recurring theme with a lot of these teams that we've been discussing in this unit. Now, let's switch it over and look at the defense. On both sides, or let me say this, both safeties are returning. That's good. Scotty Edwards, and then you have Colin Wright coming back. I mean, the DBs, it might be some of their best strength when it comes to the defense. In terms of the front seven, man, the front seven for this team all grades horribly,
No bueno.
horribly. Like they don't have one guy in there who even grades respectfully. Um, it leaves a lot to be desired, man. And I
That's
think they're
why
going to
they
have
were
a hard time.
118th last year in defense.
And I don't think it's going to get like I think they'll get better than 118th, but how much better? I don't think they're cracking 100.
No.
So 3.5, man. That's still a very low number. Let's look at the schedule. TCU, I think that's a loss. Cal Poly, that should be a win. You get a bye week to prepare for Syracuse. I think, but the only issue that is it's at Syracuse. We're thinking of the travel, man. You're going cross coast for this game to play at Syracuse. That's a toss up. And then what they're probably going to do, they're probably not even going home. You take your hotel from Syracuse and you go straight down to South Carolina, baby, because you got to play at Clemson the next week. And then you're probably going to lose. Think about that, man. That's 2 weeks in a row on the road based upon this schedule. Because I promise you, they're not going to fly back to California for like 2 days and then fly back. It's just not efficient.
Oh,
You got Virginia Tech. We know we're high on Virginia Tech. Then you go at Notre Dame. That's a gauntlet, man. I mean,
and then
you got to go
SMU.
cross. Yeah, you got to go cross country, play Syracuse, and even if you win that and you're 3-0 at this point, then you got to go at Clemson with no home, not going home to even like recharge your phone or anything. You got to go play Clemson. Then you got to play Virginia Tech. Then you got to play Notre Dame. Then you got to play SMU. You're probably demoralized by this point because you just took 4 L's on the chin, and if you lost to Syracuse, you just took 5. So, I mean, then you get Wake Forest. That's a winnable game. I think they can win that. They're at home. Then you got NC State. Their schedule is brutal, man.
Yeah,
Their
they
schedule
got
is
such a bad
brutal.
draw. They got such
Their
a bad
schedule is
draw
so
from.
brutal. Then bye week, and then you get Louisville. You
Yeah.
play all the best teams in the ACC. You play
I
literally all the best teams in the
I
ACC.
don't know who came up with the ACC scheduling models for this year, but
They're
like
punishing,
they
punishing.
but it's so extreme on either end. Like there's some teams that got like all the cupcakes, and then there's some teams that just got dumped with all like the tough teams.
Yeah, and look at this, man. Then they go at Cal, and we're higher on Cal, and then at San Jose State, which is winnable. But I mean Cal Poly and San Jose State are like probably the only like you got the money in the bag, and then I think maybe Wake, maybe Syracuse you can get. Shoot, I mean that's like 4 wins, man. And then like let's say they even like pull up some upset potential against like TCU or something. That's 4.5 ish. I don't think it's gonna happen, man. 3.5, and I know it's juiced to the over, but I'm going under Shoob. And I'm gonna go with the confidence point of 1. I think there's another 3-9 season in the works for Stanford. They're gonna beat Cal Poly, they're gonna beat San Jose State, and then they're gonna beat one of these other teams like Syracuse or Wake Forest. And if they go over, it's because they beat Syracuse and Wake Forest in addition to the two aforementioned teams. That's why I'm gonna go with a confidence point of 1, but to the under because I can see them getting 4, but no way in hell they're going to get 5. So
Yes, pretty fair assessment there. My key takeaways were I think Ashton Daniels should improve. Ashton Daniels definitely is the guy there, but the thing is, Elick Ayomaner, he's got a round 2 grade. Like he came out of nowhere, completely came out of the
he's a
ashes. All of a
beast.
sudden, he is a beast, and I mean, he showcased really well in that Colorado game last year when he had a lot of eyes on him, and that was sort of like his breakout game to the national public, not to Stanford fans. They knew about him, but still, like he's got a round 2 grade. But I look at him, and it's like, what's that meme of that car that's that's next to the trailer under the overhang? You know what I'm talking about?
I
The
don't
night,
know it. No.
whatever that nice car is under next to a trailer in the overhang when people are like, "Oh, a really
Oh,
nice."
and there's like a
Yeah,
Bugatti in there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is that what it is? Yeah, the Bugatti
Yeah,
next
yeah,
to the
yeah.
trailer
It's
home.
like a it's like
Yeah,
a it's like a terrible house and then there's a
yeah.
Bugatti in it.
I always thought it was a trailer home. So I was like, somebody's got to living in a trailer has got a Bugatti. And I always thought that meme was hilarious. But when I think of that meme, I think of Elik Ayomaner on the Stanford offense. That's what he is. But anyways, listen, to be fair, Ashton Daniels, he's young, man. I think he's going to improve. Like, he's such a young quarterback. I think he can get better. He showed flashes of greatness last year. A.O. Maynor, for sure, going to be a phenomenal weapon for Stanford. The offensive line, well, yeah, was dreadful, but all five starters returned. So I'm like, okay, you got to reasonably expect it's going to be a little bit better by default. It has to be. I know they were dreadful. So I actually am a little more optimistic on this offense. The one thing I will say, though, is if I was a defense, I mean, obviously, I would just double team A.O. Maynor, and then they got hardly any depth, a bunch of inexperienced freshmen behind him. So I think a lot of teams are probably going to try to double up A.O. Maynor. So we'll see how Stanford counteracts that. Troy Taylor is a good coach, but as far as the defense, yeah, man, I think again it should improve by default with lots of young experience returning, but I don't know if it'll jump inside the top 100. We'll see. It could, but that's still, a pretty low bar. The model has them at 3.6 wins, so pretty much like right on the money with what the sportsbook line has. So I was really just flipping a coin here, and you know what? I was like, I like Stanford. I like Troy Taylor. I was like, screw it. I might as well root for them to win that fourth game than have to root against them. So that was like the final tally there for me on this decision. So I'm going over with one confidence point, but it's very low, man. I mean, you said it perfectly. Like I actually only have them as a for sure favorite against Cal Poly. I have toss ups Syracuse, Wake, San Jose. Well, I actually have them as a slight favorite at San Jose and versus Wake. And I actually have Syracuse as a toss up. It is an overall tough schedule, but you know what, man? I like to have a team that's probably gonna be pretty bad that I can root for to go over here because I was looking at this and I was like, I've taken so many unders on these teams. I got to go over on somebody. Somebody's got to win one of these games. Like somebody's got to win these games, man. You can't just go one way or the other. So I'm gonna pick Stanford to get a fourth win here. So I'll trust Troy Taylor in the coaching job. Maybe they can steal one, but not confident in it at all. Next up is Syracuse, the Orange. They come in with a line of 7.5 wins. It is juiced to the under minus 160 there. You can get plus 130 on the over at Caesars, but Syracuse, first year head coach Fran Brown. First year head coach Fran Brown is the former Georgia defensive backs coach. He comes in to Syracuse, manning the Orange team. Dino Babers no longer there. He had a good run there at Syracuse, but the sports books look at this team and they got some higher profile transfers, and they're like, this team, they have a high expectation, 7.5 wins. I was honestly a little surprised to see that, but what's your say, man? What's your take on the Orange in 2024 for Fran Brown's first year as a head coach?
This 7.5 win line is not a testament of how quality of a team this is. It is a testament of how their schedule is. Their schedule is crazy easy.
Yep,
Syracuse really drew like the best schedule in the entire ACC, and their non-con
it
games
is
are
a joke.
absolutely laughable. So I mean, they I, they have a very good shot. They're gonna go bowling at the very minimum here. Dude, Syracuse was 90th in offensive efficiency last year, even with Garrett Schrader, and he wasn't really that bad. Garrett Schrader was actually pretty solid quietly. And then you're bringing in Kyle McCord to replace him, so maybe at least status quo. I know Kyle McCord put up good numbers at Ohio State, but that's with like all those great offensive linemen, great wide receivers. What, how do you do when you have significantly less talent on your own line, significantly less talent in your backfield, significantly less talent to throw to, when you have to be the guy to find a way to get around all these other obstacles rather than having those already out of the way for you? That is something that concerns me when it comes to Kyle McCord. I think we're definitely going to see a step back statistically this year. I think he'll be a serviceable starter, but I don't think he's going to be elite by any stretch of the imagination. So when we're looking at Syracuse being 90th in offensive efficiency last year, there's a chance it could go maybe to like 80th, but there's also the chance that it can kind of stagnate and stay similar to where it's at. Good for them. They do return LaQuint Allen. He's a 1,000-yard rusher, had 9 touchdowns. But one thing about LaQuint Allen is he's not a very efficient runner. He's averaging, what, 4 yards a carry, which at this level is not very good. But 1,000-yard rusher. At least there's some experience there. I look at their wide receivers, man. Their wide receivers, I'm just like, what? They brought in Jackson Meeks from Georgia. They brought in Z Haynes from Georgia, and this is Fran Brown bringing over some of the guys.
Yeah, they basically just took like literally the lowest rated player on Georgia's rosters and just had all of them
Basically,
transfer
I
over to
mean,
Syracuse.
I looked at it and I even looked at their high school things because I'm thinking, okay, Georgia player, Georgia player. Yeah, it may not have panned out, but it's probably at least like a high 4-star guy. No, Jackson Meeks was like a 3-star.
Yeah,
So I mean, this is like Georgia just like giving you the guys that like they just decided to take for whatever reason.
they just need to fill in the bodies. Yep.
Exactly. And so I look at the wide receiver room and it's not exciting at all, Shoob. There's not like any significant returning production there. There's not any alpha male. There's nothing. Like nothing that they brought in screams to me improvement. I think I think Kyle McCord's really gonna have his work cut out for him this year. And then I look at the offensive line, only 3 guys with like meaningful reps returning, and they all grade horribly, man. I don't know what it is. You did a great job grouping the team, Shoob, because you found all the teams, or in this grouping anyway, you found all the teams that basically have continuity at O-line, but all grade horribly.
It's true.
Outside of like 2 teams that we're going to talk about. But man, that's just insane to me. And so not only this, I consider this, Shoob, I think Kyle McCord's going to really struggle this year. His offensive line is going to be terrible. He's used to having a great offensive line at Ohio State. He's used to having great wide receivers at Ohio State. Syracuse, he has neither.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a good offensive line and he doesn't have good receivers. That's so red flag to me. Red flag, red flag, red flag. And then I look over at Fran Brown over here, and he's high-fiving his 2 buddies that he hired to be the OC in DC. He hired his buddy Jeff Nixon, who was the Giants running back coach, and then Elijah Robinson, who was the co-DC at Texas A&M. But I feel like he just went out there and he's like, hey, bro, we're buddies. You want a job? Let's go. I don't think he went out there and really did a lot of homework. Their whole approach right now for Fran Brown is to recruit. I know that's what it is.
Yeah, that's
They
his
brought
strength.
him in to
Yeah.
recruit.
Yeah.
Absolutely. As a coach, I don't know, man. I don't know. But
And he's
the
never
coaching
he never
staff,
coordinated either. Remember,
exactly.
that's why we gave him a low coaching grade.
The coaching staff itself is suspect to me. I think this offense is not going to be that good, man. Like there's pieces there that if you see it on paper, you're like, okay, they got some guys. They got Kyle McCord. They got a 1,000-yard running back. What else do they have? Crickets, crickets, crickets.
Yeah.
Now let's look at the other side of the equation here, because it is a 2-sided game. They do return some guys from the D linemen. Kevin Joe Biddy returns, and then they bring in Fidel Diggs from Texas A&M, who was a 92 grade transfer. So we'll see. There is some returning production on the outside end of their D line, and then they have a New Mexico State transfer and Deion Wilson coming in to help in the middle. So they may have at least an average defensive line there. Maybe slightly improved from last year, but not significantly. And then they do return Marlo Wax, one of their linebackers. He's pretty solid, and I could see some improvement. He definitely had a down year relative to the year before, because he was actually pretty dang solid the year prior to last year. And then we look at the back end, and this is probably where they're strongest, Shoob. I think their secondary is going to be their strength. They return Justin Barron and Elijah Clark, who both grade out very, very well. They bring in Deuce Chestnut from LSU. He took a little sabbatical out there and didn't work out. And then they bring in a Buffalo transfer in Devin Grant, and who grades out pretty respectably. And they return Jaden Bellamy at the corner spot. So I think their secondary is definitely going to be their stronger unit. They're going to have a pretty solid secondary. They're going to have a pretty decent group at linebacker, or at least one solid linebacker. I think the defense will be the strength of this team for sure. We're looking at 72nd in defensive efficiency. I'd like this team to maybe jump in the top 60, hopefully more than that if you're a Syracuse fan, considering the offensive concerns that we have here. But Shoob, this 7.5 win total, man, there's a reason it's 7.5, and it's not because Syracuse is legit. It's because they go week 1, they play Ohio. They're probably going to win that game. Then they play Georgia Tech. That's a toss-up. Then you get a bye week to prepare Stanford, one of the worst teams in the ACC this year. I like that as a toss-up, but I lean to a win for Syracuse there. So we've got at least 2. Holy Cross, 3. UNLV, come on, UNLV. 4. Then you go at NC State, probably going to lose. Then you get a bye week to prepare for Pitt at Pitt. Um, that's a toss up. I think that's winnable. Virginia Tech, I think you lose. Then you go at Boston College, you go at Cal. UConn's a win, and then you've got Miami. So let's assume that you maybe get Boston College and Pitt. That's 7 wins. But I mean, a lot's going to have to go right for you here for you to get that over. And I just don't see it in the cards, Shube. I think they're going to go probably 7-5 or 6-6. And I'm going to go pretty comfortably under on this for all the reasons I mentioned. There's too many concerns with me on the offensive end. I know their defense is pretty solid, but just because their line is sitting here at 7.5 does not mean this is an 8-win team. And I'm going to go ahead and agree, go under with 2 confidence points.
Under with 2 confidence points. Well, yeah, I look at this team and you went into it and you're looking at this team, you're like, oh, well, I know they got Kyle McCord, they got a high profile transfer quarterback. They got Fadil Diggs, on defensive end. They got a couple high profile transfers, Fran Brown bringing a lot of his guys over from Georgia. And you're like, on the surface, you're like, all right, they got a few big name transfers. Like, let's look at this team. And then you look under the hood and the engine is just smoking. It's crap. The engine needs to be replaced. There's
Mhm.
not a whole lot of substance here. I see a lot of flash at the top, but I see not a whole lot of substance here. Yeah, this team, I think it'll be not a rough first year because, like you said, the schedule is just a cupcake. Thankfully for Fran Brown, the schedule is so easy, and that's why I think he's got a pretty good shot to get to a bowl game. But this line is sitting at 7.5, and I'm looking at that and I'm like, what am I missing here, man? Like I don't like this team at all. Like, what if injuries hit this team? There's hardly any depth. There is hardly any quality depth here. Even guys like McCord, after him, you got Carlos Del Rio Wilson, who's terrible. I know that because he was a former Florida recruit, went to Syracuse, absolutely
Son of
dreadful
Jack Del
last year.
Rio.
Exactly. I sorry. Yeah. Sorry, but he was not that good last year. And then you look at the other skill positions at receiver, the skill positions, they have no depth. I mean, I like the tight ends, but you look at receiver, they got a bunch of, guys that have hardly played last year. And then at running back, LaQuinn Allen, if LaQuinn Allen gets injured, you know who's behind him? Two true freshmen, 3-star recruits. Like those are guys that should be redshirted, that shouldn't be playing for like 2 or 3 years. And those are the guys that are you're gonna be handing the ball off to if LaQuinn Allen gets hurt. On the defensive side of the ball, the same thing. I see some good players at starting, but around them and behind them on the depth chart, just a whole lot of freshmen and inexperienced and just not a whole lot of talent. So there's not a whole lot of quality depth here. But you said it, man. Schedule is the saving grace here for this team that I think they can still get to a bowl game. Um, my model only has them for 5.3 wins. This is like one of the
Despite
strongest.
this easy schedule, wow.
Yeah, the model has this is one of the biggest discrepancies between what a win total has and what a model has. Now, to be fair, Caesars I think is the high man on this team because a lot of the other lines. Because after I looked into this team and researched it, I immediately was like, "Oh, I'm betting this under. Like I'm hammering this," and I looked, and Caesars was the high point on Syracuse. All the other books have him at like 7 wins even. So I was like, okay, if you give me 7, and I think Hard Rock had it at only like -130 on the under at 7.5. I was like, give me that. So I spent my personal money on this under when I saw it at 7.5, and yeah, I think 6-6 or 5-7 is the most likely outcome here. I'm not as high on this team. I just the coaching staff very inexperienced. Jeff Nixon has a good NFL background at OC for sure, but the rest of the coaching staff they're focusing on building this program for the long term. And this is not us saying that Syracuse is just not set up for success with Fran Brown. It's year one. It's year one. The guy was hired to be a great recruiter doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have their ducks in a row and their act together on the field in year one. But long term, if they get some good players in the door, the arrow could be pointing up. But I think it's going to be not as a great year one into Fran Brown. So I'm going to go under with 3 confidence points. I'm very confident in this one. I immediately bet this with personal money as soon as I did my assessment on this team. Uh, so I'm going under. The schedule is a joke, but I actually have them as a slight favorite against UNLV. I think UNLV they're one of the stronger Mountain West teams, and they go at UNLV. That could be a loss right there if they're not careful. They're just games like that where I don't see them winning or potentially slipping up in. But we'll see, man. We'll see. If they go 8-4, then tip of the cap, man. I am not expecting that to happen, to say the least. So you and I are quite confident on the Syracuse under 7.5 wins. All right. Moving on here. Last but certainly not least, Notre Dame. We decided to throw them into this video to make it an even 6 teams. And so that way that'll save us a video to do potentially down the road. But Notre Dame comes in with a line of 10.5 as an independent, playing their 5 games annually against ACC opponents per their contract with the league. But the line's sitting there at 10.5. It's a little tint to the under there, -140. If you like them for the over at +110 on Caesars. Marcus Freeman coming in third season at Notre Dame now. He's got a 19-8 record so far in South Bend. And on paper, he's got a good team this year. This is Marcus Freeman's put up or shut up year, I would say. So, what do you think about Notre Dame here for 2024?
Well, I mean, it's no secret Notre Dame's got talent, man. I look at this and we see them bring the 16th most efficient offense last year and the number 6th defense. Notre Dame don't play, man. They're a good quality team. Now, my question is when I look at the quarterback position, is it an improvement from Sam Hartman? Is it adjacent from Sam Hartman? Is it a downgrade from Sam Hartman? What is Riley Leonard to Notre Dame? And I sat there and I thought about this. And I went back and I looked at Hartman's numbers. I said, yes, to me, Hartman underperformed at Notre Dame relative to what I thought he was going to do because of what I saw him do at Wake Forest. But he still played pretty solid at Notre Dame and pretty dang good. I don't know if Riley Leonard is going to be on that level of Sam Hartman. So I think at the very minimal, it's a push, maybe a slight downgrade for Riley Leonard. And I know we may not agree there, but that's what I'm thinking when I look at this. They lose Audric Estime to the draft, but they still return, Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. So those are two guys who were very highly touted out of high school. I think together they can supplement that loss. I'm not really too worried about that. And then they bring in a transfer from FIU and Chris Mitchell, which was huge because that's an 1,100-yard receiver, and return Jaden Thomas and Jaden Greathouse, some guys who didn't do too much, but they're young guys looking to make a name for themselves this season. The thing that really sticks out to me, Shoob, is that this team lost a ton of wide receivers to the portal. What's interesting about that, or concerning about that, is from a depth perspective, because say Chris Mitchell goes down, man. Now you're just bringing in a bunch of young guys. I don't know, man. There's a little bit to be desired there. I get that these guys are very talented, but in terms of returning production, it's just not there. Now I look at the offensive line too. Well, Notre Dame is an offensive line factory. We know this. They always put people in the NFL, but it doesn't help when you lose your 2 starting tackles because they were both so dang good. They both got drafted. I still expect them to have a pretty solid O-line, Shoob, but I don't think it's going to be as good as it was last year. But still good because it's Notre Dame. But I don't know, man. This offense has some question marks for me. And you may agree or disagree. Can't wait to hear your synopsis on it. But I'm definitely trending back on this offense. They were 16th in efficiency last year, and I fully expect them to potentially fall maybe like outside the top 25, but still be a respectable offense, but not be a top 25 offense. And then I look at the defensive side, and they've got some big returners here. Howard Cross returns, Riley Mills returns, both very, very good players. They brought in RJ Oben, and then, they lost Javonte Jean-Baptiste to the NFL, but overall, a lot of good returners, and they brought in a guy to replace that loss. I think their defensive line is going to be pretty dang good. Definitely a top 10 defensive line, if not a top 5 defensive line. They lost a ton of linebackers, Shoob. Maris Liafo, JD Bertrand, and those guys are all off because they got drafted. That's the quality that Notre Dame is working with. They do return their best guy in terms of being graded, and that's Jack Kaiser. So that's huge. So the unit may take a slight step back, but overall, Notre Dame coaches this unit really well. They always have linebackers as well. That front seven is going to be quite formidable. This defense is going to be still be pretty dang good. We look at the back end. They lost Cam Hart to the NFL, but they returned Ben Morrison. And then they bring in a transfer, Ron Hurd from Northwestern, who grades out pretty well in coverage. So we'll see if that's something that can supplement that loss of Cam Hart. And then you've got Xavier Watts coming back. So I'm thinking this secondary is still going to be pretty good. This defense is still going to be a top 10 defense, despite all that they've lost. I just think they're going to take a little bit step back on offense, Shoob. Now, we know that defense wins championships, but your offense still has to be able to put the ball in the end zone. So let's look at the schedule, because their line is 10.5, Shoob. I think Notre Dame is going to be a very, very solid team, but 10.5 wins, Shoob? 10.5 wins? Texas A&M is a toss-up. It is at Texas A&M, and they got Mike Elko now, and Mike Elko don't play around. They could very well go around there and lose that game. Mike Elko is going to be ready for Notre Dame.
Riley Leonard
Then
going to face
NIU,
his former coach.
yeah. And then you got NIU, which is probably a win. At Purdue, probably a win. Miami, win. And then you've got Louisville, which will probably be a toss-up. I mean, I think they outmatched Louisville, but big game Brom, Jeff Brom don't play. That's one you can't just completely write off. Then you get a bye week to prepare for Stanford, as if you needed that. Then you got Georgia Tech, the needle in the haystack that you can step on, and all of a sudden your day's ruined. And then you've got Navy, and then a bye week to prepare for FSU. That's huge. You get a bye week to prepare for Florida State, who I'm a little more down on this year than most people in the market. So that is a very winnable game. Then you've got Virginia, Army, and then at USC, who don't play no defense. Shoob, this is very tough because I only see maybe 4 games on this schedule that can even remotely come close to challenging Notre Dame. And they're going to win 2 to 3 of those. But here's where I'm going to make my final decision, Shoob, because I'm not confident. I will say right now it's going to be a confidence
Suspense
point of
is
1.
killing me, man.
But here's what's going to interpret my final decision. I think the quarterback play is going to be not as good as it was with Sam Hartman. And I think Riley Leonard, if he gets injured, they could be in trouble. So for the sake of this being a 10.5 line and there not being a lot of room to operate there, I think 10-2 is something that I can see. And so I'm going to unconfidently say Notre Dame goes 10-2 and under.
So confidence point of 1.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, I do have a few disagreements with you here, especially on the offensive side of the ball, but I do agree with you in some areas as well. So couple things. I went through the same exact thought process with Riley Leonard. The first thing that I was trying to think of when I was like gauging this team and this offense was, all right, what is Riley Leonard in relation to Sam Hartman? Is he a downgrade, upgrade, etc., like you highlighted? I had a tough time with this. As a passer, it's a downgrade, obviously. Like it's definitely a downgrade. Riley Leonard's not known for his passing ability. He can be good, but definitely a downgrade from Sam Hartman, who was traditional pocket passing quarterback. But what Riley Leonard does is he makes up for it with the legs. Riley Leonard's a phenomenal dual threat athlete, and that's where he makes up that ground. So I had my notes downgrade as a passer, but overall, in terms of just overall value to the team, it's probably a wash, I think. It's a tough call because they're two completely different quarterbacks. But here's the thing, and this is what gave me room for optimism, and this is one thing that I think could get overlooked. Marcus Freeman went out and hired Mike Denbrock, former LSU offensive
From
coordinator
LSU.
from LSU. I think it's perfect timing for bringing in Riley Leonard. You have a coordinator who obviously coordinated great offenses the past couple years. He had Jayden Daniels, Heisman quarterback. Obviously, that's going to make you look good, but Jayden Daniels is a dual threat guy. Riley Leonard is a dual threat guy. I think his Denbrock scheme fits well with Riley Leonard, and that's what gives me room for optimism. Now, the offensive line, I think that obviously at offensive tackle, I mean, you're taking a massive hit, massive hit. You're losing Joe Alt, first round pick. Joe Alt was a first round pick. I think he was a top 10 pick, right? And then on
Hmm.
top of all, you also lost Blake Fisher,
Blake
who went in the
Fisher.
second round. Yeah. And the new guys they got coming in, replacements Charles Jagusa and Tosh Baker, they didn't grade out well last year. It's gonna be a big hit at offensive tackle for sure. Interior, all those guys coming back. I like the interior at guard and center, but here's the thing. Normally that would scare me, but when you have a dual threat guy and you have an offensive coordinator that can scheme around poor offensive tackle play, it at least gives me a little bit of room for confidence that that issue or that drop off at tackle can be navigated around, to put it lightly. And I actually think you're overlooking the receivers, man, a little bit. I know that obviously you bring in Chris Mitchell, but you got these young guys like Jaden Greathouse, Jaden Thomas,
Hmm.
Jordan Faison.
Yeah,
Those are all
yeah,
guys
I
I
mentioned
think,
them.
yeah, but I think those are all guys that can take reasonable step forwards this year. They showed some promise. I think that this will be the best year that or the best wide receiver room that Notre Dame has had in a little bit of time because part of the problem for Notre Dame the last few years is that they haven't had great wide receiver rooms. And I'm not saying
Hmm.
it's going to be an elite room, but I think that they will progress forward into a good wide receiver room. And I like the depth now,
I will
especially with
say with this,
Mitchell.
Shub, I will say that I do think that they will take a step forward as well because Notre Dame had a lot of mouths to feed in their wide receiver room last year. There's a lot of guys who have like 200, 300 yards like receiving that transferred out. And I mean, they were thrown to everybody. So now with a more consolidated group of receivers, I can totally see what you're saying.
I will say I do agree with you about the depth behind Riley Leonard. I know if you look on the surface, you look at backup Steve and Jelly, decent numbers, but if you really looked at it, he got most of his playing time last year. He started in the bowl game against Oregon State, and they killed Oregon State, but that was an Oregon State team that didn't care to be there in the bowl game. So you beat up on a team that lost its coach and lost like the entire team to the portal. So I don't really put too much stock in that. And of course, Riley Leonard got hurt last year, and he's a quarterback that likes to run. So I do agree with you. If Riley Leonard gets hurt and or I guess you could say you don't know if you're confident in Riley Leonard playing a full season based on his past and his play style. So that is a valid concern there. So there is a little bit of give and take, but I'm on the off. I guess my bottom line here is I think the offense is it's gonna look completely different, but I could still see them maintaining their top 20 status in terms of efficiency if Leonard stays healthy all year round. And then defensively, man, I'm pretty high on the defense, man. I'm pretty high on the defense.
I'm pretty high on the defense
They
too.
got
Yeah,
five, but
they
here's the
got a good
thing.
D.
They got five guys on the defense that are projected to go inside the top 4 rounds of the draft this year. They got
Hmm.
five dudes. Like
That's nothing new for them.
no, it's not. But I'm pretty high on the defense, man. I think that this unit could finish inside the top 3 or at minimally top 5. I think they can make that jump into the top 5 this year. I know there's going to be other great defenses like Ohio State. Georgia definitely is going to be really good. We'll see if Michigan can keep it up. Clemson will be good. But I think Notre Dame will be right up there with like top 5 defenses in the league in college football this year. But anyways, my model has them projected for 10.7 wins, and the model has them favored in every single game. Has them favored in every single game, and that's something that I look at and I'm like, oh, it's hard to fade this team right now. But here's the problem. The problem is that this line of 10.5 is tough because 10.5 is the highest line on Notre Dame. A lot of the other books have them down at 10. So I was looking at this and I was like, 10.5 doesn't make me confident in an over. If this was at 10 and I
If it
had the
was at
push
10, I would go
insurance,
over. Yeah.
right, exactly. So that would be my advice to you. If you're high on Notre Dame this year and you think that they're going to be a really good elite team, definitely get the 10 number. I think it's even money right now, but don't play it at 10.5 if you're on the over, that's for sure. Don't play this line, but we have to play this
Mm.
line because we want to be consistent for the purposes of the show. I, I I don't know, man. I'm gonna have to go over. I'm gonna have to. I just think this defense is gonna be really good. And yeah, if Leonard gets hurt, definitely probably won't get the over, but I'm gonna lean over here at 10.5 because I have them as pretty sizable favorites against everybody on the schedule except for Texas A&M and then a moderate favorite against Florida State at home. But here's the other thing. They got Louisville at home. They got Florida State at home. Like
Off a
those
bye.
draws,
Off a
yeah,
bye.
they got those draws against the tougher ACC teams. Well, they're not in the league, but you know what I'm saying. They're
Mhm.
those games against the tougher teams are at home. I think we both can agree USC is kind of scammy. I don't I don't envision USC just having a miraculous like
Yeah,
turnaround. I think they should beat
USC
them
is
on
not
the
going to be
road.
as they're not going to be as good as they were last year. So
Yeah, and they don't have a huge home field advantage. And I think the only game that really worries me is Texas A&M first game of the year, but brand new coaching staff, like it's a good time to play them. I will say though, I would give the advantage to A&M only because you
home
got
and Elko.
Elko, who's a defensive guy, and that's his former quarterback, Riley Leonard, that he's going to prepare for. So he knows exactly how to prepare for Riley Leonard because he saw him every day in practice the last 2 years. So I would actually give the edge to A&M there, but it's tough there, man. I don't know. Even if they lose to A&M in the first game, like let's say they lose to A&M in the first game, I have them as decent favorites against literally the entire rest of the schedule.
Hmm.
I could see them losing that first game against A&M and then going 11-1. And then they make the college football playoff. They won't get a bye because they're not in a conference, so they're gonna have to play in the first round. They can't get a bye. But I don't know, man. If I had to say right now, I think I would put Notre Dame as an at-large in the college football playoff. I could see them finishing 11-1 or 10-2. I'm pretty high on them. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But them not being in the conference, of course, and not having a conference championship game that's going to play against them. But for purposes of win totals, I don't like that I'm playing the high number here, but I'm going to go over with low confidence.
And I will say, Shub, I will say, at 10 it's an over. At 10.5, it's an under for me.
Yeah, very fair. Very fair. I think that is about right. At the end of the year, I would not if you say Notre Dame's going to finish 10-2, if we know that's the final record, I would say that seems pretty appropriate. But yeah, I think it's going to be a good team, man, and they're going to have a lot of
I think
players
11 and
drafted
1
off the
is
defense.
definitely off the on as potential on the horizon. But for me, it's the quarterback situation that scares me. So I have to err on the side of if Riley goes down midseason, are they going to lose a game that they shouldn't lose with a backup?
That A&M game week 1, that's going to be one I'll be watching for sure. That's going to be a
Oh
good
yeah, it's
game.
going to be a great game. Yeah.
All right. Well, that'll do it, man. We've covered the ACC plus Notre Dame. It's we got a long way to go though. We got a long ways to go. We got three more big super leagues to cover. But the Big Ten, that's a behemoth because they got 18 teams, but then at least the Big 12 and the SEC have a couple less teams. So that most of those videos will be only 5 teams instead of 6. But that's down the road. But yeah, man. I'm glad we're doing this, man. Very informative process. If you're a fan of one of these teams that we just covered here today, let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments. And now that we've covered the ACC, one last quick response here puts you on the spot. I will answer this as well. If you had to guess right now, what is your ACC championship game and who do you have winning the ACC? On the spot right now.
Ooh, that's tough.
It is tough.
Screw it. Give me NC State winning the ACC,
Ooh.
and you know what? Let's make it fun. And they beat SMU.
And they beat SMU. Wow. So NC State over SMU for the ACC. Holy crap. That would be nuts, man.
Let's
That
make
would
it
be
fun.
nuts. So I'm gonna say I think I'm a little crazy here, but I'm gonna say Miami over Virginia Tech for the ACC.
I
No
like it.
Florida State, no Clemson, and we might look like idiots at the end of the
I
year.
honestly
But
I feel like this is going to be a year where Florida State or Clemson's not going to be in it.
yeah, I
Not
don't
saying they're
think it'll be
bad.
both of them.
Not saying they're bad,
Right.
but I just think there's more quality in the ACC this year. So yeah, definitely interested in seeing what happens. It's going to be a fun league to watch this year. I'll definitely be looking at the ACC this year.
Yeah, and those dark horse teams like Virginia Tech and SMU and NC State, they're right there lurking. Louisville potentially too in the mix, but yeah, it's FSU and Clemson are they're gonna have their hands full this year, and Miami. They're
Hmm.
always in the mix, but maybe this might be the year. We'll see. We'll see. All right, man. Well, this is the Saturday Scholars for Xan and Shoob signing out. See y'all later. Have a great day, and we will see you in the next video as we head to the Big Ten and start covering those teams. That's going to be a fun league to do. Always a lot of fan engagement there. We'll see y'all later. Have a great day. Peace.
Saturday scholars on the mic, breaking it down so right. Their analysis hits the target, prediction accuracy so razor tight. Bank account on the rise with each winning call. Not here for hot takes, just the facts, that's all. Getting out, shooting snacks and zany bars, a treat for each week. College football fans rejoice, find what you seek. Hidden gem in the podcast world, they know all. Saturday Scholars Anthem, standing tall and tall. Saturday Scholars, the kings of the game, making waves with the knowledge, bringing the fame. Tune in each week, we stay on track. The Saturday Scholars, we got your back. The Saturday Scholars, the kings of the game, making waves with the knowledge, bringing the fame. Tune in each week, we stay on track. The Saturday Scholars, we got your back. Oh, oh. Getting out, shooting snacks and zany balls, a treat for each week. College football fans rejoice, find what you seek. Hidden gem in the podcast world, they know all. Saturday Scholars Anthem, standing tall and tall.